Hello there. Hi. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Saturday morning here at the Harvard Ed Portal. My name is Olivia Ives Flores. I'm a creative in the city. I wear a lot of different hats, but for this project in particular, I was wearing the curator hat. So with Zachary Lanoue and a great team of developers, social planners, and marketers, we worked together with Harvard to create a big socially minded community activating project, which ended up being a 3,000 square foot photographic mural, a piece of public art for Lower Alston, made by Zachary Lanoue of Yellow Tree. And the process has been very, very interesting. I've certainly learned a lot from Zachary about the capabilities of photography and a technique that you're all going to be learning today called Landscan, which is Zach's interpretation of scientific techniques, which he'll go much more in depth about today. But the concept behind it was how, in a city like Boston, that is so, our reputation as a city is innovators in science and technology. As an artist, how do you embrace that and create a piece of work for the public? And I thought that Zach's work using Landscan was a really great example of that, those collision and that fusion of inspirations with technology and science. So that was our inspiration to make a public piece of work in that vein. Together with a really great team, we were able to actually pull this off and create a 1,000 pound, 3,000 square foot photograph that's wrapping a building just down Western Avenue over there, and hopefully this afternoon we can take a look at it if you haven't seen it already. So in the theme of community engagement, science, and technology, we're delighted to be hosting this workshop and teaching you the exact process and the immense capabilities of Landscan and how you can utilize it to make your own art in so many different ways. I think it's just an amazingly agile technique, and there's a lot of things that you can do with it and new ways of thinking because it offers you so many different perspectives. So on that note, I'm really delighted to introduce Zachary Lanoue. He is an incredible artist, and he's going to be leading you through this workshop today, which is going to be really fun. So here's Zach.
Thanks, Olivia. Olivia's been an awesome person to work with on this project, which has been just mind-blowing experience for anybody. But it sounds like I'm getting a little crunchy here. I'm going to try to turn the volume down now a little bit, see how that does. You guys can hear me all right? Oh yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'll just try to project. Anyways, so I'd like to kind of start off the workshop with just saying that I am not a trained scientist. I'm not a trained really anything. I have a studio art diploma from the School of Museum of Fine Arts and a curious appetite. So, I'm actually in a learning process of this material myself. And so I think that's part of why I'm so excited about it is that I'm in the process of discovering everything that has to do with photogrammetry and photo stitching, photo mapping, 3D modeling, taking two-dimensional information and making it appear 3D is just such a Midas sort of magic trick that you can do. But it's about learning, and I like to use this sort of graph as a great tool for expressing where you are in your knowledge point at a certain subject. So let's say this line represents your knowledge, or your perceived knowledge, and then actual knowledge. So when I was a few years ago, when I first started messing around with this technique, I thought that I invented it. So my knowledge and confidence was way up here. And then the more I learned about it and the further I got into it, I realized just how much else there was that I didn't know, and my knowledge and confidence went down here. So over the course of the last year, I've done a lot of research and educating myself and realized that, the masters of this thing, they're like all the way over here. They know it all and they have all the confidence in their knowledge. So I'm in the process of climbing back up to where I thought I was before, you know? So I might be somewhere around here, maybe, you know, in between knowing everything that there is to possibly know about this stuff and, you know, in the early throes of being totally in love with the concept, but having almost none of the technical expertise. So that's kind of how I want to preface this presentation or introduce me to you in that, you know, I'm not a endless oracle on this stuff, but I am an expert in doing what I do, which is Landscan, which is basically a way of using aerial surveying techniques to create pieces of fine art. And so how I'm doing this is actually stitching together hundreds of images together to create what looks like one image. But that gives you a very, very highly detailed image that you can zoom into and blow up to, like we've seen in mural, huge proportions. So this also is the way that Google Maps makes their interactive 3D globe projections in Street View. It's the way that the Matrix portrays bullet time, if any of you have seen that. It's the way that the computer graphics imagery is generated. It's the way that virtual reality headsets can have input to play. So anyways, we're going to be going into all of that later. But I'd like to give you a little tour through what I've been working on in the Landscan series of images, which started almost a year ago exactly, when I was watching a Discovery Channel show on shipwrecks and people that were hunting shipwrecks. And they had a submarine and they were hovering over this shipwreck underwater. And on the bottom of the submarine they had lights and a camera pointed straight down, and as they were hovering over the shipwreck, they would take a photo, and then as they hover a little bit further, they'd take another photo, and they'd continue that over the entire shipwreck. And then later, once they brought the camera back up onto the boat and downloaded all the images, they plotted them back all out and recreated a very, very detailed image of the shipwreck that was in fact measurable, that didn't disturb the scene at all, that could be measured volumetrically, and mapped in a 3D space. So once I saw that, my mind kind of started lighting up, and I had all these ideas of how I could do this myself, or how I could kind of bend this technique to kind of do what I wanted it to do. So went to my, I'm going to skip forward here a little bit, and then go back. I went to my backyard and tried it out. So I had a regular DSLR camera, and I put it up on top of this extension pole, and used a tripod head on the top of it so that the camera was pointing straight down. And I walked around and used a little remote to click the shutter, and walked around in this sort of haphazard fashion through my backyard. And you can see that there's a lot of distortions and points where things are repeating, and this Weber stove, and you know, this here we go. This chair right here is all wonky, and there's two levers over there, and these are getting ready to cross over there. So I saw this and I realized that there was something interesting going on, but I knew that I needed to get a little bit more information. So I did some research and realized that, you know, the lens I was using was wrong, that I wasn't calibrating each of my shots correctly. So I went back and I switched from a wide-angle 24mm lens to a narrower, more normal, flat 50mm lens, and then worked out a cool trick with my phone to give me a protractor that I could tell the angle of the camera even without looking through the lens. And went out a couple weeks later and made this image, which is with 50mm lens, calibrated exposures. So you can see this, it looks a little bit cleaner than this one, but there's still some wonky stuff going on. Like, I don't know if you can see this, this is actually a tabletop, but it looks more like a Hat-Man or something. and it's Picasso-esque shapes. But anyways, it was enough that once I saw that on my computer screen, I got really excited, and I thought that there's something special going on here, and this is the point where I'm right here, where I think I invented this, and this is the coolest thing ever, and that no one else has seen anything like this before. And so I get all excited, and I decide this would be a great thing to take on the road, and so I'm gonna go on a road trip, and I'm gonna photograph everything all over the country, and I kind of did that. I went out, started in my neighborhood first with some easy subjects like this baseball field or this hilltop at sunset. And then now here we are in Austin, Texas. This is where a river feeds into another river. This is a huge basin up here, and then this little trickle of water is all that they allow to flow down into the main river that goes through Austin. So this is the first image that I made on this trip to California and back. And now here we are in Los Angeles. This is the Marina del Rey, which has been, it's a marina that's right in the city, so it's been pretty heavily polluted, but recently it's been coming back in health. And evidence of that is, here's a 100% close-up of it. You can see these are all little tiny shells. And so the texture that you see here is actually thousands upon thousands of these little shells, which means that it's a good economic indicator. That's not economic. It's a good environmental indicator that some good things are happening in the water there. And now here we are at the headwaters of the LA River in Calabasas County, which is kind of near Mulholland Drive. That rings any bells. When I was out there, it was at the height of the drought, and it was really strange because it was the same time that there was total carnage going on with snow in Boston, and I felt guilty for missing it. And all my friends, back at home were looking at me posting these pictures on Facebook, and they must have been like, "Oh, screw you, man." That's so good. And then I would be at a gas station or something, and someone would see my New York plates, and they'd be like, "What are you doing here?" And they would actually. A lot of people told me that they really wanted to make a pipeline for all the snow melt to bring the snow from Boston to dump into their reservoirs in Los Angeles, because it's really that bad. And some of the places that I go in this series started being guided by the idea of water and following water as a basis to explore, and using that as kind of a foil. It also works out really great in terms of imagery, because where you find water, you find flat areas, which allow me to do this technique and gives me the space. But also, water itself has a really interesting visual impact on the surface of the earth, and you can see that through erosion. You can see that through the absence of water, especially, and all the interesting shapes that it forms are really great subjects for photos. So here's a 100% crop of that last image to give you an idea of the sort of detail we have here. And here we are in Pasadena, which is a nice looking peel out someone did near the Jet Propulsion Labs. And here's a 100% crop of that to show you that you can see every grain of the cement that's in there. And then now we're getting a little bit more interesting. We're going to the beach here and using individual photographs to not make a accurate representation of what was there, but to use those photos as collage material. So this is just purely abstract, purely fun. All I did was take individual frames of the water, of the waves hitting the shoreline.
Sorry,
that's fine. And stitch them together in a way that they would never actually be in real life, creating this sort of weird ocean ring or some fantastical island that's not really there. Here's the close-up of that image there. And then the same technique, but taken a little bit one step further by making two rings or a water donut. It's kind of similar to a way that a DJ would take samples and then remix them into a different song. is kind of taking that same technique, but using those auditory techniques in a visual way rather than just for remixing beats or something. Here's that. You can see here the edge of one photo. This is the edge of another photo, and then a third one and a fourth one to give you kind of an idea of how these different layers are being blended together in Photoshop. These are all done in Photoshop, by the way, pretty much only. And here we are in Los Angeles, and we have another example of that kind of sampling technique, where in this photo, in this backyard, there was actually only 3 or 4 chairs. There's one towel, there's one pumpkin, there's one grill, but I moved them in between the exposures to essentially duplicate them. So it looks like there's a totally abandoned pool party, or that some nuclear disaster is happening somewhere off camera. You can see that there's one towel, 2 towels, 3 towels, 4 towels, 5 towels. There's only one, like this pumpkin. So yeah, it duplicated all the items in this backyard to kind of augment the photo and make it a little more interesting. You can kind of see these different slices here. There's a little hole, so I used a sliver of image to kind of patch it. This is a very kind of cobbled together looking image, and I kind of kept it looking like that without blending the frames together, to kind of let you see the cuts in between all the different exposures and how they don't quite line up, but from a distance, it's kind of convincing. When you get closer in, it's a little bit more, you can tell that there's something different going on there. And here's that same sampling technique where I had a lovely assistant, Luba, duplicated all over the beach. And the sand here was actually the really convenient part, because the sand is such an organic, uniform texture. You almost can't see the cuts in between the frames in this image because of the sand texture. So when you get really up close, you start seeing that there are lines here, and from a distance, they're not really as apparent. And it's also not really as apparent that it's the same person. When you get closer in, it's quite apparent that it's just the same person over and over.
So why did you keep that 5x4 pattern? Like why did you make it almost like a perfect pattern? Was that part of your message?
No, it was just kind of how it came together in the software, and also to make it an image that would kind of fit in a conventional sort of frame or aspect ratio. I originally thought that it was going to be a little more chaotic, but I thought it was kind of funny that everything is so neurotically null, and that would, I've never seen a beach look like that. So, if I could make something a little bit uncanny, I would. And because I get to be in control of this kind of image, where this is totally fantastical. This is not anything you can see in the real world. So I'm just going to go with that, and go. That's one of the things I like to do. Is like, if you're going to do something, either do it really subtly so that no one notices, or go all the way with it. And so this is going more towards all the way. Yeah, so there's that. Actually, this is the same shirt that I'm wearing right now. Very cool. One of my favorite shirts. One of my friends is a big filmmaker guy out in Los Angeles, and I told him I was in town with my camera, and he said, "You should come by the set." So I got to be the on-set stills photographer for this film shoot, and during our lunch break I went out and made a Landscan of part of the film set, which was set in the day that World War II ends in Poland. And it's really intense. It's a beautiful film, but I love shooting on sets because everything is already lit. The art department has already come in and made everything beautiful, and you have this privileged access. So I love shooting film sets, and this one was a really interesting one. Now here we are out of LA finally, and we're in the desert just south of Death Valley. And this is actually the last Landscan that I made with that camera, because about an hour or two after I took this image, my camera flew off my neck as I tumbled down a hill and smashed into a million pieces, thus ending the photo safari. Anyways, this is kind of still following that arc of water. So if you go back about 100 years, you get to find out about the man, Robert Mulholland, who went through LA and kind of created a big fuss over water to fund these giant projects of irrigation and aqueducts. And this used to be a lake. We're looking at the lake bed that had been created by the aquifer tapping. So anyways, this lake was drank in the turn of the century by the inhabitants of Los Angeles, and then this created one of the world's dustiest areas, and giving almost everyone around it lung cancer. Since then, they've been doing surface remediation where they've been trying to quell the dust by pumping up even more water from the LA aquifer underground and spraying it over the surface to help keep it moist so that wind won't pick it up. And they've planted this saltgrass on the surface, which you can which is in this image, you can't really see it, but pretty much everything that you see here is evaporated salts from the water that was there before. It was a glacier that melted. This is not a lake that has like a spring that refills it. It's just a one-time deal. It's just a puddle, literally, that landed there, and then LA drained it. And then as all the water drained, all these minerals sort of accumulated on the surface. And now what they do is they mine it. So they flood it. All these salts and minerals come to the surface and then crystallize, and then they skim off the top. So this is actually a surface mining operation that was made out of a natural disaster, basically. And the main product that gets produced from this lake bed is actually borax. Does anyone know what borax is? Anyone that old does natural laundry? Awesome, I'm there with you. Borax is a detergent, it's soap. So it's actually kind of interesting, like LA created soap out of this natural disaster. Anyways, it's not really that great to have on your skin, especially in high concentrations, which I later found out after falling knee almost waist deep into it. This is also somewhat very similar to quicksand. So I started falling into quicksand and I used I think it might have been this one, yeah, you still see some silt in the bottom of it where I used it to pull myself out of the quicksand. So after that I got kind of scared. There's no one around there for miles. If you fall in quicksand, that's it, you know. So I got out of there and I was climbing up the hill and had the camera around my neck, and there's this really loose, silty sand that used to be the lake shore. And I'm climbing up from the lake bed up to the lake shore, and I grabbed onto a thing that wasn't actually a thing, and it just fell off my neck, landed on some boulders, and literally just shattered. And after that, I got really depressed. I got a six-pack and went to a trailer park and like stared at the sky for like 2 days. And yeah, it was really, really sad. And I didn't realize how connected I was to my camera. Yeah, we're good. It's just.
No, I mean when your camera smashed.
Oh, I never found the camera. It fell into boulders. It was like a boulder field at the bottom. These big round boulders, and it landed in between there, and just couldn't get to it. So yeah, the memory. I thankfully had just switched memory cards, and unfortunately I'd taken off my $100 lens and put on my $700 lens. So my $700 lens is now somewhere close to this image, along with the camera. So maybe it'll be some sort of archaeological find. That's kind of what I'm thinking. It was also, I had probably 300,000 exposures on it. The shutter was probably getting close to its last legs. So it was probably the worst thing in the world at the time. Now I'm over it. But yeah, there's the rig that I used to make all the images that you've seen. At the time I had it attached to a external metal frame backpack to take some of the weight off of my shoulders and make it a little more ergonomic. So yeah, up here there's a regular Canon DSLR camera. This is the extension pole. Here's the metal frame backpack right there. And then I would put that backpack on backwards and then have the extension pole out like that with the camera about 12 to 15 feet in the air. And then that's how it went. There's a little close-up of that salt grass that they've been planting out there. As you can really see the salt crystals down here, and they just kind of soak up through the stalks of the grass, and they have cows grazing on them and eating them. It's a weird place. Fun to get there if you ever get a chance. So that takes us back to Boston, where I returned back, made a beeline straight across the country, and wound up getting another camera and starting up Landscan again. And this is a shot that I made of the last sort of dying dregs of the snow farm that was in the South Bay Shopping Center, kind of off Mass Ave. So this is after that giant blizzard 2 years ago, and this is where all the snow got dumped, and this is all the remnants of it melting. So you can see, if you look real close, this is all just flattened, thrashed trash. My friend said, oh man, you'd love it, it's so gross and nasty. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And then I just didn't think maybe I should bring waders or some big boots. I went through this in sneakers, and this looks like surface, but it's actually like a foam that's sitting on top of snowmelt water that's a foot to 2 inches deep, and it had undescribable textures that were really not fun, and I took a shower immediately after this and did not feel clean. But it just shows, this is only a small section of it too. It just kind of shows you an extent.
What is the scale here? How many feet are we looking at?
This is, I kind of tend to think in how many exposures it is. So if this is about 350, but displayed here is probably around 280 once it got cropped down. But you can kind of see a scale, this is a shopping basket, so that's probably about 3 feet long on that edge, and maybe 2. So it kind of gives you a little bit of scale. So it's equivalent to being about 75 or 80 feet in the air, taking one single image. But it has a lot more detail than a single image taken at 80 feet in the air. And you can get further in than this, but it's really, really gross. But if you lost a cell phone a couple years ago, maybe you had a Elvis statue reserving your parking place, it's somewhere in there. This thing's been, dragged away into a dump, but it was quite impressive while it was there. Here we are down in downtown financial district, a little more pretty. Still very industrial. This is all the reflections coming off of the windows at midday. A giant skyscraper reflecting down this freshly paved street. So all these little squares here, they're kind of the reflections of the sun, beating down. And here's a little image of that close up. You can see the remnants of this car left behind for us.
How long does it take to do that whole array? Because the sun's moving, so the reflections are going on.
Yeah, that's definitely taken into consideration. A day like today is probably the perfect day to do a Landscan in that there's no clouds, and we have direct sunlight, for pretty much the entire day. But if it's a really cloudy day or there's intermittent clouds, it can be almost impossible because your exposure would change too much in between each of the images. It depends. The amount of time it takes to do one depends on the scale of it. So, for instance, this one probably took me less than half an hour, where this one probably took me about an hour because it's maybe 4 times as big. This one's relatively small, it's less than a block. This is probably about the size of 2 tennis courts, maybe 1 tennis court, but very detailed. Yeah, and all the playgrounds and public schools for Boston, the middle schools especially, like to have this sort of painted playground, and I think they're awesome. This one is just around the corner from where I live in Dorchester, and yeah, it's just a neat image It's created not really aesthetically, but more for gameplay. Like you could play Foursquare here, you could do baseball, kickball, you could play, color tag or something like that. It's just a neat, fun image. There's a little close-up of that top left corner, top right corner. And this brings us to the first scan that I did with the drone. My friend, a drone pilot, and I got together and went. This is taken maybe like a 5-minute walk just in that direction, right by the Charles River. It's a community garden. So we wanted to test out to see if his drone could be capable of doing this with my skills in assembling these images. And so we used a few different techniques to make this image and then also extrapolate data from it to make a 3D model of the garden, which we will get to later. This is the last image that I've made, the most recent one, with a salt marsh up in East Boston, not too far from here. Little short story on it. This is right next to the called the wheelberator, the recycling incinerator that gives us a lot of electricity here in Boston. Anyway, it's right near the airport and right on the water, right next to these kind of endangered salt marshes where a lot of ocean and land species kind of meet. Anyways, in these channels here, these are irrigation channels that wildlife reclamation forces have dug for fish to breed in. So the fish would actually swim up these channels during a flood or high tide and lay eggs. Same thing with the frogs and birds. And in these channels is actually water. You can't really see it in this photo, but this water is filled with tadpoles and tiny little fish. It's a really cool place. This is all peat moss with these tall grasses growing out of it, and this image was taken right after a big storm surge at high tide came in and swept back out, where it left all these really interesting kind of matted patterns in the texture of the grass. So I like to think it looks like mermaid fur. There's a little close with that. So in this hole right there, there's probably like 50 frogs. It's crazy.